What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more Nena, and we're returning to the 1985 English language album It's All in the Game. Big thank you to both Michaela and Seb, who have been providing insight as to the differences between the German originals and these English language songs. And we're continuing through side 2, and the next track is Let's Humanize. I like the title. It gives me a sense of a desire to view others as more human. To humanize is to identify, focus on, or even enhance the human characteristics, meaning those that are psycho-emotional, those that place individual value on a life, on a person, and perhaps larger groups of them. So in that regard, it sounds like an admirable disposition to not view others, either individually or collectively, as the other or as mere entities and not people with hopes and dreams and fears and their own life trajectories. Now, it might be less overt. Humanize could relate to maybe the connection between two people and, trying to find common ground or something to that effect. So I'll see what I can catch on a first listen, and then I will look at the lyric sheet. And as I mentioned before, the lyric sheet or the inner sleeve is a little tattered, so we'll see if there are any lines that are compromised by the presence of some cut or tear. In any case, this is Nena from It's All in the Game, the 1985 English language album, and the track is Let's Humanize. waiter, can you bring the check? Okay, so number one, lyrically, I'm intrigued because it feels like there maybe is something to my thoughts in advance in that, the refrain that we heard in the chorus and, repeated throughout the song, that we can humanize through this power of our feelings and improve our lives. What is it? Humanize and improve our lives through the power of our feelings. That feels very much like the idea of seeing people as people, humanizing them rather than dehumanizing them, and that can improve things both in your mind, interpersonally, and collectively, even internationally. So it feels like maybe that's part of the point being made. Then there was a verse about, like, what was it, soldiers marching, and then talk about going left and to the right, which, that has a very, like, march type description, but then two steps, or like one step forward, two steps back, which sounds like maybe making the observation that if we don't humanize, we end up taking two steps back as a species, as a planet, and end up in military conflicts, and, with entire nation states seeing others as the other, and, not full people, but just impediments to our own aggrandizement, or, economic windfall, or, impediments to our political power, and thus, leads to some of the worst things that humans do. So, and again, this is the mid-'80s, and, whether it's punk rock or synth pop, which is funny, like, or I guess I'll finish the statement, like, commenting on those types of international, socio-cultural, and political issues is, or was, very common. I will say, like, the music itself had a bit of a marching, very, powerful and kinetic sound to it, and yet at the same time it had a lot of, like, funky elements. The bass line was funky, there was some, like, keyboard riffs that were very, like, flashy. Then of course there's this, like, ambient sound, and, like, in some of the sparser, almost like breakdown sections where it's kind of like waiting for the tune to resume, or the normal tune to resume. We hear people talking, like, in a lobby or a restaurant, and these, like, live world type noises. And so again, maybe the idea that, humans are out there doing the things they do. But yeah, it kind of reminded me of, like, the Eurythmics at their zaniest and funkiest, which again, like 85, Be Yourself Tonight, they're making tunes where they're blending synth pop with funky sounds and, like, danceable rhythms with a bit of a, like, soulful flair, as opposed to, being more, like, overtly synth pop with an electronic sound, or, like, new wave. So I guess this did remind me of, like, a funky synth pop track meets still a bit of new wave energy, which I don't know, in 85, were people still saying new wave, or had that term sort of, like, fallen by the wayside? But yeah, it kind of had that vibe of a, like, funky synth pop tune, still with that kind of, like, new wave energy, but definitely a bit more abstract, a bit more, like, zany, and, right up till the end where we get that, like, again, we're back in a restaurant or, like, a hotel lobby or something like that. So yeah, that's what I took away from it. The vocals, they definitely stood out, but they were almost, like, very intense, kind of like shouted, which kind of went with that back and forth marching sort of rhythm and percussive power. Like, the whole tune had a lot of sonic intensity, not in a bad way, but it was just, there was a lot going on, and, some of the noises would rise up and take over, then everything would kind of peter out, and we hear people talking, and, like, sounds of something, people at a table or something, and then it would kind of roar back in. So yeah, a lot going on. Let's see what the lyrics actually say. And once again, you'll have to excuse my, if not old man eyes, certainly middle-age eyes. Okay, so let's humanize. We can humanize the value of our lives with the power of our feelings. Boys are blue, girls are pink. Okay, so I did hear a line about women, and I was thinking that this could be, like, about seeing the other, in terms of the other sex, the other genders, as, being fully human, and not just seeing them as, like, humans on the other side of the fence. But yes, I did slightly misarticulate the chorus line when I began this outro, which is to say, it's not improve our lives, but it's we can humanize the value of our lives with the power of our feelings. But okay, boys are blue, girls are pink. Learn to do and not to think. Tied in rope, wrapped up in ribbon. Dirty up those perfect clothes. Let's humanize. Okay, so that sounds like, getting a bit dirty and thus getting down to the way that real humans live and real issues, even if it means getting yourself a bit dirty and not being, pristine and proper and sort of ivory tower above the fray. So again, maybe I'm not sure if that's what that's exactly about, but there's a class or prim and proper versus down and dirty sort of dichotomy being suggested. Soldier, soldier, march together, one step forward, two steps backward, to the left and to the right, strip away that uniform, let's humanize, let's humanize. I feel like some of the analysis I did just now is very much in line with that, so I would think that is more or less what they're talking about there. We can humanize the value of our lives with the power of our feelings, sweet seduction, painted face, beauty's a woman's place, courtesan or Madonna, peel away that polished mask. So again, seemingly focusing on the male-female dichotomy and the idea that, women can make statements. They can, articulate intellectual ideas or artistic creations, and they're not just there to be domestic or to look pretty and be adjunct to males. Sweat and muscle bound in leather, men are free but chained together, lock and key with their emotions, hammer down that barricade. So maybe the other side of that men are supposed to be, tough and to, be physical and not to be in touch with their feelings and not to be creative and artistic or to express things that are anything but, strength and so on. But as a result, they end up kind of bound by these societal restrictions or mores or expectations, which, that's something that a lot of punk bands sing about too. But I let sweat and muscle bound in leather, men are free but chained together. Lock and key with their emotions, hammer down that barricade, break through that, be a full person. Don't just be a pre-prescribed and, societally restricted male. We can humanize the value of our lives with the power of our feelings. So, yeah, I think more or less I was on to some of what was happening here, but I think it was actually articulating the sentiment across some different dimensions and in different scales and contexts. So, yeah, I do like the idea, and it sounds like the humanizing is, happening in different ways, or she's advocating it. She is normatively prescribing it to happen in different ways, between men and women, between nation states, between people, in our own heads. So, yeah, I think that's a really admirable song. Once again, I wonder how it might relate to the German original, and ultimately the Sonics, as I said, very energetic, very intense and bombastic, and also a bit zany and unexpected. The idea of having these sections where it's we're hearing the din of people talking, where it's not normal music, quote unquote, per se, but this lived in inhabited world sort of atmosphere. So yeah, a very cool one. Absolutely enjoyed that. One of my favorites on the album so far. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.